We've seen a lot of ridiculous things so far this offseason, and maybe none of them as ridiculous as what we're going to discuss today. Josh Donaldson is open to playing one more year in Major League Baseball. He wants to leave it all out there on the field, and he wants to do it with the Toronto Blue Jays. So we'll break that down and much more in this episode of Jays Digest. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. Now, as many younger Jays fans, Josh Donaldson was probably my favorite player when he was with the Jays, when he won that MVP in his first year. Obviously, Troy Tulowitzki was my guy growing up, and that was my guy before he even got to the Jays, so I was excited when they got him. But the bringer of rain, he gave us a lot of great memories in a Blue Jays uniform. Some of the best years that we've ever seen from a Blue Jay, point blank. But right now, he is no longer that player that he was in 2015, 2016, when he was that MVP caliber guy. But he was asked the other day about potentially playing one more season because he's had a couple of down years, and maybe he doesn't want to go out on this sour note that he's had over the past couple of seasons. But he was asked about the possibility of returning to Toronto, Nick, and he said he would be open to it. Now, if you remember quite clearly, Ross Atkins and Mark Shapiro were the ones that shipped him out of town for a relief pitcher. So I just don't think the fit is there. I don't think the front office would even entertain the idea. But Josh Donaldson is definitely in favor of making a return to Toronto.
Yeah, it's a really funny quote, especially given the time of free agency. Before we get into that, a quick reminder, hit the subscribe button. We're very close, less than 200 subs away for 10,000. Scroll down if you're not subbed. Go do it right now, please. And we're very, very close to that, and that's a huge goal for us. Yeah, let's get into the first topic and the big one here. I agree with you. I don't think it's going to happen, but I'll tell you someone who does want it to happen, and it seems like that is Josh Donaldson. And hypothetically, would you consider this was an interview with Donaldson, a reunion with the Blue Jays in free agency if that opportunity presented itself? And you can pause and read the whole thing, but he said, yeah, definitely looking forward to seeing if they reach out. Definitely something he's interested in. And he basically goes to say that, Toronto was his home for however many years it was. His kids are half Canadian. His family's all up there. And for me, that would be the tip of the iceberg to end his career, which would be great. And we'll see what happens. Now, Peter, from a baseball perspective, like you said, Josh Donaldson, he had his years in Toronto. He was an MVP, one of the best players, and not the best player in baseball in 2015. He was that guy. He was unbelievable. And the past few years, especially with the Yankees, he has not been himself. His last decent season was with the Twins in 2021, where he actually played quite well, but he's on the downwards trajectory of his career, if not pretty close to the bottom, like you said. And the Jays need a third baseman. That's what makes this conversation interesting if they don't bring back Matt Chapman. That's why people are talking about it, but it's funny to think about, though I don't know how well he would fit. Maybe.
Well, the only way I could see him potentially fitting is as a bench guy and someone that plays maybe twice a week, maybe three times a week if you're strapped with injuries. But the way I see it is that his leadership over the past few years hasn't been good. He's gotten into a lot of verbal arguments with opposing players, with his own players as well. And if you remember, he went to Milwaukee, if I'm not mistaken, and he didn't even introduce himself in the clubhouse. He said, and he was asked about it in the media. He said, "I'm Josh Donaldson. They know who I am." Well, it's still a sign of respect for you to go and introduce yourself to your new teammates, maybe some guys that you've never played against, never even played with. So it's just a cordial thing that you're supposed to do. And, he still thinks very highly of himself, clearly, and he's not that same player that he was when he won the MVP award in 2015. He was great when he was here, but he's no longer that player, and we cannot stress that enough. An example that I want to give to a guy who did introduce himself to his teammates was Chris Bassett. If you saw a lot of the spring training footage, he went and introduced himself to each and every one of his teammates. They know who he is. They know who Josh Donaldson is, but he still went up and said, "Chris, nice to meet you. Chris, nice to meet you." So it's those things that I look for in a veteran who may not be the same player that he was in years past. You got to have that kind of impact in the clubhouse. And this Blue Jays team is missing a vocal leader. They're missing a guy who lays it all out there on the field, who will do anything to get this team over the hump. And I just don't think Josh Donaldson is that guy. Maybe if it was a couple of years ago, I'd say absolutely bring him back. But the Jays have a vacancy at third base, and I don't think Josh Donaldson can fill that.
Yeah, the culture is pretty good right now for the Blue Jays. And like you said, if you're bringing him in for a bench role, there's a lot of clubhouse issues regarding Josh Donaldson in the past. Who knows to the extent that, like you mentioned, a lot of them, the introducing thing, that's something fairly minor, but it kind of goes to show there's a lot of, scuffles with the Yankees player. There's a lot of things, even in his time with the Blue Jays. He was known as he lays it out on the field, and that's his personality. But is that a guy you want to bring in for a bench role? Would you rather bring in, I don't know if the Jays and Ross Atkins, obviously that relationship there is probably could be fractured as well because it took him so long to ship him off. But it seems like an absolute handful. And I'm not going to lie to you, if this is the highlight of our offseason, if we sign Josh Donaldson, then we're in for a very
there's no way it is. There's no way it is.
No,
Nick.
exactly.
No
but the fact we're having this conversation, it kind of goes to show what the news is like right now. Obviously, a lot of things are happening, but again, I wouldn't mind him maybe as a bench guy, depending on what his maturity level is at this point. But again, with all the clubhouse issues, it might be time for this conversation to come for an end there. But any quick final thoughts as we move on to another very, very interesting conversation?
I think it's a very one-sided conversation. The Blue Jays haven't even brought this possibility up. I mean, Josh Donaldson was asked about it, so he's just answering the question honestly. Like, why wouldn't you want to go to a team where you had your best seasons as an individual player? Why wouldn't you want to go to a team where you had a lot of success collectively as well to end your career? And like you said, he has those family ties as well. His fiance is from there. His kids were born in Canada, so why not entertain that idea? I'm sure Josh Donaldson would go anywhere and try to go out on a high note when it comes to his major league career, but Toronto has got to be one of his preferred destinations. But unfortunately, their timelines just aren't matching up right now. I'm looking at maybe an Andrew McCutchen type of situation with Josh Donaldson. Maybe he plays the final year in Oakland and plays every day over there and gives Oakland A fans one more memory of him and his great years over there as well. But yeah, we might as well move on to this topic because we're just beating a dead horse, in my opinion.
Yeah, and the one quick final thing, a McCutchen type player, he has a bit more clubhouse positivity than Josh Donaldson would. So I don't know. It's a funny it's a funny thing there. Too much drama. We'll move on now. Fun to discuss though. And this is just a quick note. Jays and Padres potential fit. Now this isn't really reported. Obviously, there's been some speculation and rumors about the Jays maybe their big splash being Juan Soto as of late. But again, this isn't a report. This is just a conversation we're having, and around baseball we're having as well. That's why it's not highlighted in the title or thumbnail or anything. But Scott Barlow was traded, Peter. Austin Nola, Tim Hill were cut as the Padres begin to shed payroll. Now, this is a huge story around baseball. The Padres need to shed payroll. They want to shed payroll. Their ownership, of course, wants to cut ties on a lot of guys. Could you see, and we'll discuss a few players now, that maybe the Jays get in touch with the Padres about a couple guys? I don't know if you have one in particular you want to talk about. As again, the Padres are going to be a hot destination, especially in a free agency class that is very, very weak, and the trade market should be heating up. And the Jays are a team that's heavily involved in trade talks.
Yeah, well, just 12 months ago, they were in on the Ohtani sweepstakes. They were one of the main teams that were rumored to be in on Ohtani heavily. And now if you look at all the betting odds and all those odd sharks or whatever, you're going to see that the Padres are nowhere to be found. And that's because their owner sadly passed away, who spends a ton of money. And now he's passing it on to, I guess, future generations. And he's no longer part of the team, of course. And who's going to spend that money now? Is the new ownership going to be willing to spend as much as he was? And also their TV deal with Bally Sports. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty there. A lot of teams have been affected by the downfall of that network. So it's a no-brainer that the Padres and many other teams are going to be shedding payroll this offseason if they don't expect to compete for a World Series. So I expect the Padres to be in the market. They're going to listen to guys like Juan Soto, maybe Manny Machado, maybe even Ha-Seong Kim, whose stats you're seeing over there. Although Ha-Seong Kim, I don't think that's very realistic because he doesn't make that much money. He's someone that you can keep around for the long haul, and definitely someone that should be part of the future of the San Diego Padres. But when it comes to Juan Soto, who's going to hit free agency, and the Padres seemingly not really willing to give out a $300 million or $400 million contract anymore, they're going to listen in on him. Maybe Manny Machado, although it's unlikely with that 10-year deal that he signed. Maybe Fernando Tatis as well. So there's a lot of big time deals that they're going to be looking to shop, or at least in the market to shop. So it's interesting. I think it's a potential fit with the two teams because the Jays do have some young, controllable guys that they can offload. But yeah, apart Hassan Kim, not very realistic in my opinion. But those other two big fish, I could see it happening.
Yeah, I just want to throw him in there because I love him as a player, and yeah, that's a guy the Padres need to
Mm-hmm.
keep. Unbelievable defender, but no, I agree with you, and I think that ultimately, if the Jays strike out on Shohei Ohtani and they strike out on Cody Bellinger, I think they might. Now, there's a decent chance that they immediately shift their talks, obviously to trade talks, and maybe they get in touch with the Padres about whether that's Soto, whether that's Tatis, depending on which one's available. It seems that Juan Soto could be available, but yeah, just an interesting thing to talk about is what seems like a year ago today when we were talking about the Padres, this big powerhouse of baseball. It's unfortunate now that they have to cut payrolls, and one of the best players in baseball might be available for trades. But that'll wrap up the video. If you want to see our video from yesterday, click on the screen now. We're waiting for a move to happen, so and I'm hoping it's not in the realistic realm of Josh Donaldson. But we'll see. It was fun to talk about, and hit the subscribe button. We're on the road to 10,000. We'll see you tomorrow.